So a few days ago, a man in Beijing drove a bulldozer into a crowded market, killing over a dozen people. Although there's very little coverage in the Western press, I think it's a very important story to talk about because it's emblematic of what's been happening in China. So after this event took place, as you could probably imagine, the government took down all the videos on social media and is censoring any and all discussions about the topic. I did watch a couple of the videos posted on Twitter. It was a gruesome scene for sure. I remember in one clip, there was one guy who was kneeling down trying to help somebody else, I guess, who had already been run over by the bulldozer before. He was maybe checking his injuries or trying to get him up or something. But while he was doing that, the bulldozer just turned around and ran him over too. It was super hard to watch, I'm not gonna lie. I don't think we're ever going to know the true motive of the perpetrator. Rumor has it that he has some kind of a vendetta against the government. What I do know for sure is that this whole thing could have turned out far worse had it not for the fact that one of the tires on the bulldozer popped halfway through and a couple of guys were able to climb onto the bulldozer and subdue the driver basically. They beat him up real good actually after dragging his ass out of the bulldozer. I'm not gonna lie, that part was satisfying to watch. So the reason I want to talk about this story in particular is that I think it's emblematic of a change in approach of how the Chinese government handles this type of events nowadays. Because I remember just 15-20 years ago when something like this happens, although the government may obfuscate some key details or downplay the severity of it, they would usually still report it in state media. I think the reason they stopped doing that and instead just buried the news entirely is that they have grown increasingly concerned that any attention drawn to this type of incidents would just inspire more copycats. And in some ways, they're kind of right about that because just in the last few years, I can recall multiple instances where an individual driving a car usually into a crowded space was able to commit mass killings. The one in Zhuhai back in 2014 was definitely the most prominent one where I think over 38 people were killed and dozens more injured just by one guy in his SUV. Because China has very restricted policies on guns, so motor vehicles appear to be the weapon of choice for these perpetrators. When it comes to these mass killings in China, what you have to understand is that, although not always, it's usually motivated by some kind of personal grievances against the government, and sometimes it could be something rather small, like my license was taken away by a corrupt government official. Like, as bad as things have become in the US, we still have a relatively free judiciary, we still have a relatively free press, so there's always this kind of recourse that you can go to air out your grievances. But now in China, if you piss off the wrong person or get wronged by the government, you're pretty much fucked. So the anger just gets bottled up, and eventually for somebody who's predisposed to mental breakdowns, you can see why one day they would just snap and lash out their anger on innocent people. I'm not justifying it, but that's just what happens. And on top of that, mental health, just like in the US, is probably another big factor in this, and China is definitely not known for his stellar mental health programs. So the Chinese government is in a really difficult position right now. Despite having so much control over its citizens, because of all the idiosyncratic conditions that we have talked about, it doesn't really have a good way to stop these killings from happening. If anything, the numbers are going up. The US will always be the number one country with the highest number of mass killings per year, but sadly China is quietly catching up to it without you even knowing.